My roommate next door wasn't who they said they were. I moved in hoping for one peaceful year where I could finally feel like a normal person instead of the girl everyone forgot about. At first, she was everything the listing promised: quiet, polite, the kind of smile that doesn't demand anything back, and I let my guard down so fast it felt stupid, like a traitor to the way I'd learned to survive. But she used that softness like a map. Her name, she told me straight away, was Hannah, or maybe Zoe. She laughed and said pick whichever sounded nicer. And I picked Zoe because I liked the sound of it and I wanted to be the first person who might maybe like a name she picked for herself. She worked at a bakery, she said, part-time nights, school during the day, and she had this ridiculous habit of leaving out tiny chocolate crumbs on the kitchen counter that made the apartment smell warmer, like someone was trying to make the place belong to both of us. My sister Ava came to visit that first month and Zoe shrank in a way I recognized from my childhood, the polite smile folding into silence as if the noise around her had a rule: don't take up space. Ava didn't notice the silence. She noticed the crumbs and exclaimed that the apartment felt cozy, and Zoe's smile returned as if it had been waiting for approval. I told myself the silence was nothing. I told myself a million small lies because the alternative was to watch a slow, quiet unraveling of what I wanted to believe: safety. The first strange thing was a drawer. Not a dramatic locked chest in a closet, but a narrow drawer in her desk by the window that she always kept shut. At first I thought it was private in the usual roommate way: birth control, journals, the receipts you don't want a stranger to see. But Zoe would jump when I walked by, like the drawer had an alarm only she could hear. She answered my casual questions in short sentences, and then angled the conversation toward me, asked about my classes, my plans for the weekend, the sort of painfully normal talk that rewires you to think everything is normal again. She started making me tea in the mornings without asking, adding too much sugar and then laughing when I complained. Those small attentions made the locked drawer feel like a footnote, less a secret and more of an awkward quirk I could ignore if I wanted to keep the warmth. Then the phone calls began. Legible at first, an evening call she would take in the hallway, whispering always about nothing. Okay, I know, I'll be there. I thought she was meeting a friend, someone who needed quiet updates about trivial things. The voice on the other end never spoke more than a sentence, and Zoe's face would fall into a sort of practiced worry that didn't match the tone of the words. She'd come back into the kitchen and offer me cookies, sit down and ask about my day like a normal person, all the while checking the time on her phone like she was counting something invisible. Once, when Ava came by and Zoe heard the knock, she went suddenly still in a way that made the hairs on my arm stand up. She didn't open the door right away. She stood very still and did something with her hands under her sweater, then pretended to have just been tying her hair when she swung the door open. The silence when Ava sat down was heavy. Zoe didn't ask questions, she didn't mention classes like she used to, and she disappeared into the hallway for long minutes at a time. I started to feel the apartment as a three-way thing: me, Ava when she visited, and this creased, secret Zoe who existed in the margins. Small things added up, like loose paper folding into a pattern. I found a receipt tucked under my cereal box one morning, a fast food place I knew I hadn't been to, a timestamp in the dead hours of the night. I found a school newsletter once with a different name on it entirely, a name that wasn't Zoe or Hannah. I asked, thinking there was a simple explanation, but Zoe's laugh was brittle and she said, "Old friend," and deflected with a question about my job interview. I began to notice how she avoided certain topics: her hometown, where her parents lived, even what classes she actually took. When I asked where she went to school, she said, "Around," and turned back to the stove like she hadn't heard me. Loneliness does strange things to a person. It makes you cling to the smallest kindnesses and rearrange your moral furniture to make room for them. I covered the absence with excuses and told myself it wasn't my business. The moment everything coalesced into the shape of truth was stupidly ordinary. Ava, bored and exacting in that way she is when she wants to hurt me without trying, decided to help clean the hallway mail. She found a campus ID wedged behind the radiator in Zoe's room, plastic cracked, a different name printed under the photo, and she held it out like a weapon. "Who is this?" Ava asked, slow and sweet, and Zoe's shoulders folded into herself like paper. She didn't scream or yell, she didn't run. She simply said, "You shouldn't have seen that," and for the first time there was a real tremor under her usual stillness. The next hours were a kind of messy exposure. Zoe slammed her drawer closed, which I'd never seen her do, locked the front door from the inside, and told me we needed to talk. She spoke in fits and starts, pages from some carefully guarded script spilling out into the room. She'd been using a different name because she was trying to keep a place to herself. She'd lied about school because she didn't want to be found. She'd chosen our apartment because it looked like the kind of place where nobody would ask too many questions. Ava's face lit with the thrill only people who sense leverage get, and she pressed for details like a reporter. I felt like someone watching my life from the outside. Zoe, whose real name turned out to be Hannah after all, but not the Hannah she'd first offered, a middle name, a past I'd never been invited into, told us she was avoiding something. People who had been looking for her, a past mistake that made being known dangerous, a misunderstanding that could become the kind of trouble that follows you for years. She said it so quietly I almost believed it because it fit the way she'd acted for months, all small apologies and ready teacups. But the longer she spoke, the more bits didn't add up, and I kept thinking about the locked drawer and the late receipts, and the way she'd gone silent whenever Ava came around. I wanted to feel compassion because I have always wanted to be kind to the person who looks like me, small, overlooked, trying to hide. But I also wanted to pull the thread and see where it led. I wanted to know whether I'd been living beside a scared person or a liar who had used my loneliness to stay hidden. When the truth came out, because secrets like that have the bad habit of needing air, I realized there were no tidy answers. There was someone, yes, searching, and there were mistakes, yes, and there were also choices. To stay hidden in plain sight, to become someone's shadow in a place that would look the other way, to take advantage of the girl who wanted so badly to be seen that she would accept crumbs and whispered excuses. Zoe cried when she admitted parts, small shreds of story that made my chest ache, and Ava, who had wanted a confession to swallow whole, softened for a moment and looked at me like I might break. I felt that break inside myself, the part that had believed a small kindness could be traded for truth, snap, and then rearrange. It wasn't heroism to demand answers, it was self-preservation. I locked the drawer myself that night and opened it in front of both of them. Inside were papers and a second phone with a different name in the contacts, compelling and boring, terrible and mundane. Her reasons were real and messy, but so was the fact that she'd used my invisibility to live in the cracks. I walked back into the kitchen and poured us all tea because old habits die slow, and Zoe sat opposite me and told me things I didn't want to hear and things I needed to. In the end, I understood that she hadn't been only a villain or only a victim. She was a person who'd learned the cruel arithmetic of being unseen and used it to survive. I understood, too, that I couldn't be both kind and swallowed. I asked her to be honest if she stayed, to be named if she stayed, and I meant it. She agreed with a nod that didn't quite meet my eyes. The apartment smelled faintly of sugar and something like relief, which is not the same as safety, but it was something to start with. I did something petty, and it spiraled into the biggest decision of my life. I slid her charger behind the couch like it was nothing. It was 2 fingers worth of movement and a ridiculous little thrill, because for once I was the one making a small disturbance in her orbit, and honestly I can't explain how calm that felt, like tapping a sleeping animal to see if it flinched, except the animal was my sister and the flinch was the attention I never got. And yes, it was childish. And yes, I told myself it was nothing more than a tiny payback for years of being the background noise in every room she entered. But I also didn't imagine how loud nothing could become once people started listening. The first time she noticed, she rolled her eyes and tusked like I was a weird roommate who'd misplaced her things. Then she announced to Mom that she'd been so inconvenienced because her phone hadn't charged, and Mom muttered that I should be more careful. And that should have been the end of it, except Ava didn't stop it annoyed. She kept bringing it up for days, each mention sharpening into accusation like she was carving a narrative where I was petty, mean, manipulative, the list she'd been collecting since I was 12. People pick sides without thinking. Friends at school smirked when she told the story with dramatic gestures, and even Mrs. Patel gave me that look teachers give when a quiet kid finally acts out, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was wild how one tiny act rewired the room into a new geometry where I was at the point of origin for every grievance, and everyone else was orbiting her outrage. At first I tried to laugh it off. Okay, I moved a charger, I said, practicing nonchalance in the mirror, but the more I said it, the thinner the armor became. Her voice rose in family texts, punctuation dripping venom. Why would you do that? Always the same with you. People started dredging up small slights I'd swallowed for years and packaging them as evidence. And suddenly a dozen small, hurtful moments I'd internalized as normal were being read aloud with the kind of attention I'd wanted for ages. It felt like watching a slideshow of myself as seen through everyone else's verdicts. I found myself standing in the hallway listening to Mom and Ava argue about whether I was jealous or petty or unwell. And in the middle of their sentences, I thought, wait, was I supposed to be the problem forever? I kept shrinking because people had always expected me to, because when I got loud, I was inconvenient. When I wanted things, I took up too much space. So I perfected the art of smallness until it was automatic. I apologized before sentences finished forming in my brain. I minimized my wins. I edited myself down to fit the chair at the table. But then the charger incident unspooled other things, like a drawer being opened. Old secrets and resentments I'd been too scared to voice surfaced because once the tone changed, once Ava's grievance made me the center, it was safer to speak my own truths into that new attention than to keep hiding them. I started saying things I hadn't planned to say, tiny confessions that weren't exactly fireworks but felt like that to me. That I remembered being called invisible by her friends in middle school, that I still flinched when pictures were taken, that I stayed silent at dinner so she'd be the story everyone remembered. Mom's face did something I hadn't seen in years, a slack quiet, like a window left open on a windless night. She asked questions that sounded practiced, and for each answer I gave, the room rearranged itself a little more. People who'd always assumed I loved being small were surprised, and then angry that I might have been hurting. Ava shifted between real confusion and the kind of righteous performance she'd used on me since we were kids, and that hurt worse than the accusations because it felt like the old script. She gets to be the wounded one, and I'm the villain. The pivotal moment came one evening when I found myself alone in my room scrolling past old texts where I'd apologized for things I didn't remember doing. And there it was in black and white. A pattern of automatic apologies, a paper trail proving I'd trained myself to make others comfortable at my own expense. I could keep excusing it as habit, or I could finally name it what it was, a survival strategy that wasn't working anymore. So I decided to speak, but not in the way I had before. No trembling confessions, no half-formed sentences. I wrote a letter, a messy, honest thing that started with small, stupid facts like, you called me invisible at 12, and ended with harder ones like, I don't want to be the one who always apologizes for existing. Sending that letter felt like putting a match to a moth-eaten sweater, scary, because the fire might light something I couldn't control, but also inevitable because I'd been cold for so long. When I gave it to Mom, she read in the kitchen and didn't cry. She didn't yell. She looked like someone waking up. Ava's reaction was immediate. She accused me of lying, of twisting memories to make her look bad, and friends messaged to ask if I was okay or if I'd lost it, and even some relatives hinted I was being dramatic. But something else happened too. People who usually glossed over me started asking questions I hadn't dared to imagine someone asking, like, are you happy? And do you want help? And what's your version? Those questions pulled the conversation away from a single petty incident and toward me, toward the messy center I'd kept hidden. The family arguments that followed were loud and ugly and also clarifying. Names got said that hadn't been spoken in years, things like favoritism and comparisons and you were always prettier. And we tripped over memories like furniture in a dark room until the layout changed. I won't pretend it was neat. Nothing about that time was neat. There were days I wanted to crawl back into smallness because attention can feel like heat and it's easier to be cold than burned. But the more people kept talking, the more I could see patterns instead of personal failures. It became clear that staying the version of me who apologizes first would only lead to more of the same, more swallowed words, more fridge magnets that read sorry in my head. The choice was painful. Keep being the quiet center of other people's stories or risk losing them and gain myself. The truth is I was terrified of losing family. We were a knot of shared history, and if I cut a string, maybe everything would unravel. But the idea of rearranging my life to make others comfortable felt like a betrayal to myself. I couldn't keep committing. So I left, not in a movie way with a suitcase and dramatic music, but quietly, like unhooking a picture from a wall and setting it in a closet. I moved out a month later, took a job a town away, texted addresses and signed leases, and practiced being the person who made plans without asking permission. The first night alone, I sat on the floor of my empty room and cried for the kid who learned how to disappear. And then I laughed a little because it felt absurdly luxurious to take up space without apologizing. People called, some angry and hurt, others curious, a few apologetic. Ava sent one message that said, good luck, and I didn't answer for a long time because my silence was finally mine. That petty act, a moved charger, had been the pebble that made an entire damn shift, and I don't romanticize it. It was immature, and it hurt people I love, but it also cracked open something that needed breaking. I had to choose between shrinking forever and letting myself be messy, loud, wrong, human. I chose me, and that choice was terrifying and painfully ordinary and the best and worst thing I've ever done.
My neighbor next door wasn't who they said they were. It started with sugar. That was the whole thing, or at least that's how it felt at the time. I moved into the house after Mom said I needed somewhere quieter, somewhere I could get my head straight after everything that had been going on. And the guy next door was the first person to knock on my door with a smile and a paper cup of coffee like we'd known each other for years. He said his name was Grant, said he lived alone, said he liked keeping to himself, which honestly sounded perfect to me because I was too tired to be the guy who had to perform politeness every second of every day. He had this easy way of talking, like he already knew the rules and I didn't need to explain anything. Friendly, normal, safe. I remember thinking, finally, one adult who isn't going to make this weird. Seriously, I was wrong. At first it was little stuff. He'd ask to borrow sugar, then milk, then my screwdriver set. He'd bring the stuff back wiped clean and placed neatly on my counter like he was trying to prove something without saying it. Sometimes I'd hear him moving around late at night, not just footsteps, but heavy dragging sounds, then a laugh that stopped too fast, like somebody else was in the house and they'd both remember to be quiet at the same time. Once I asked him about it over the fence and he just smiled and said, "Old pipes." That's all, old pipes. I nodded because that was what I did. I nodded at teachers, at my dad, at my coach, at people who expected me to be easy. It was a skill by then, but the sounds kept coming. Not every night, just enough to stay in my head. Then there were the visitors. That part made me feel stupid for noticing, because who keeps track of who goes into their neighbor's house? Apparently I do. There was a Gracie Dan that showed up twice in 1 week, always after dark. Then a woman in a red coat who never stayed more than 10 minutes. Then a man with a shaved head carrying a duffel bag, not a grocery bag, a duffel bag, and he didn't knock like a guest. He looked over his shoulder before he went inside. I started seeing patterns where I didn't want to see them. Maybe because I had too much time on my hands. Maybe because I was already in that weird place where your brain keeps picking at one thought until it becomes impossible to ignore. Either way, I was watching. The first real crack came when he asked about my family. Not in a casual way, in this soft voice, almost careful, like he was testing where the sore spots were. He asked if I saw my mom much. I said yes, sometimes. He asked if my dad lived nearby. I said no. He asked if I ever felt like I had to be the strong one. I laughed because it was such an odd thing to ask, and he nodded like I'd answered a question he'd already heard before. Then he said, "It's hard when people only like you when you're useful." That hit me harder than it should have. I didn't answer. I just stood there holding the stupid sugar bowl like a prop in a play I didn't know I was in. After that, I started noticing how he reacted when I mentioned depression. Not in a normal, sympathetic way, more like he was checking a box. He'd tilt his head and go quiet, and there was this tiny shift in his face, like he'd been expecting a certain response and got one he could use. When I mentioned that I had some rough stretches in college, he asked what medication I took, not whether I was okay. Not whether I had support. Medication, flat, practical, almost hungry. That should have been enough for me, honestly. But I was lonely and he was right there, smiling, asking if I wanted help carrying groceries, telling me I was doing better than most people in the street, which is an insane thing to say to someone you barely know, but it made me feel seen. Pathetic, I know, still true. I started paying attention to the house more than I should have. Curtains closed all day, lights on in rooms that nobody seemed to use, a back door that opened at random hours. One afternoon I was taking out the trash and I heard something through his window. Not a TV, a voice, a child. Just one word, maybe mom, said in a way that sounded scared and tired and too young for the calm, empty house I'd been told about. I froze, then the voice was gone. When I looked up, Grant was standing there with that same polite smile, asking if everything was okay. My stomach went cold. I said yeah. Of course I did. I always said yeah. The break came on a Thursday. I remember because it was raining, and because Dad had called earlier to tell me I was being dramatic about not coming home for the weekend. The usual. I was already in a bad mood when I heard the sharp slam from next door, followed by a man's voice shouting, then silence so hard it felt staged. I went outside before I could talk myself out of it. His front door was cracked open. Boom, that was it. One stupid sound and I was moving before my brain caught up. I pushed the door wider and saw two people in the hallway, one of them the shaved-head guy from the duffel bag, the other a teenage girl with her wrist grabbed tight. Grant was there too, but he wasn't Grant anymore. Different posture, different face. Like the whole friendly neighbor act had been a costume he forgot to take off in front of me. He looked at me and I swear the expression on his face wasn't surprise. It was annoyance, like I'd interrupted something he'd planned carefully. Everything after that came in flashes. The girl screaming for help, the shaved-head guy cursing, Grant saying very calmly that I should close the door and go inside, like I'd just wandered into the wrong apartment, like this was a small misunderstanding. I didn't even think. I yelled for the girl to run, and she did, straight past me into the rain. The shaved-head guy lunged, slipped, hit the floor hard, and then suddenly there were sirens in the distance because someone else in the street must have called them. Maybe the woman in the red coat. Maybe the old man across the road. I don't know. I just know Grant's face changed again when he heard the sirens. All the warmth vanished. That friendly voice was gone. He looked stripped bare, furious and scared at the same time. The police took hours to sort it out. Turns out the house wasn't his. Not really. It was being used as a front, and the family man story he gave everybody in the neighborhood was part of it. Something clean and harmless to keep people from asking questions. The girl was part of a foster placement he and the others had been using to hide movement between addresses. The visitors weren't friends. The noises were arguments, restraints, panic. All the signs I'd brushed off because I didn't want to be rude were exactly the signs I should have trusted. That part messed with me the most, not the lie itself. The fact that he chose the one guy next door who would mind his own business, who'd feel guilty about snooping, who'd second-guess every instinct until it was almost too late. Me, of course. Nobody really knows what to say after something like that. Mom kept telling me I did the right thing. Dad kept saying I shouldn't have gone inside alone, which is rich coming from him. And the neighbors acted like they had always suspected something, but never enough to say it out loud. That was probably the worst part. All those people standing around afterward, suddenly full of opinions, suddenly very sure. I kept thinking about how Grant had used the version of me that was easiest to manipulate. The polite one, the tired one, the one who wanted not to cause trouble. I hated how much that made sense. The girl lived, that matters. They found more people tied to the whole thing later, and the house got boarded up and the street went back to pretending it had never happened. But I didn't. I can't. Every time I hear someone laughing too quietly behind a closed door, I think about that hallway. Every time a neighbor is a little too friendly, I feel that same cold shift in my stomach. And yeah, I still think about how easy it was for loneliness to make me overlook what was right in front of me. I thought being careful meant not bothering people. Turns out sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes the kind thing is to ask the uncomfortable question. Sometimes the hard part is trusting yourself before somebody else teaches you not to. Am I the asshole for refusing to cover for my girlfriend? I'd spent so many years being the guy who fixed everything that I almost didn't know how to say no anymore. Seriously, if somebody needed a ride, I gave it. If a teacher was annoyed, I explained myself before they could even ask. If my mom was stressed, I stayed quiet and made it easier. That was just who I was supposed to be, the easy one, the good one. The guy who kept his head down and didn't make things harder for anyone else. So when Sarah called me that night and started crying before I'd even said hello, my first instinct was to comfort her. Her voice was shaking, and she kept saying, "Ethan, please, please don't be mad." That should have been my first warning, but I still asked what happened because I always asked. And she told me she'd told her friends she was with me all afternoon when she'd actually been somewhere else, and now one of them had started asking questions. Not the whole story, never the whole story at first, just enough to make me feel like if I loved her, I'd make it go away. I remember staring at the wall in my room, phone pressed to my ear, and feeling that old familiar pull in my chest. The one that said, "Just smooth this over and everybody will be okay." But I was tired, not sleepy tired, deep down, bone-level tired. The kind that builds up after years of swallowing your own irritation so other people don't have to sit in discomfort. So I asked her really carefully what she wanted me to say. She said, "Just back me up, say you were with me." I said no, just like that, no long speech, no apology first, no softening it. I told her I wasn't going to lie about where I was or pretend I'd been part of whatever story she'd told. There was this tiny silence, and then she went cold in a way I'd never heard from her before. She said I was embarrassing her, that I was making her look stupid, that if I cared about her, I'd protect her, protect her. That word hit me like a slap because it was never about protection. It was about me taking the hit so she wouldn't have to. I told her I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I was just not lying. That made her angrier, way angrier. She started saying I always acted like honesty was some kind of moral trophy, like I thought I was better than her. That I was being selfish because I wanted to feel clean while she dealt with the fallout. Clean, can you believe that? Like telling the truth was some sort of vanity project. I kept thinking, this is insane. I'm the one being asked to lie, and somehow I'm the bad guy for refusing. But I still tried to explain myself, because of course I did. I said I wasn't trying to punish her. I said I was done covering for stuff that wasn't mine. I said I'd spent too many years being the backup plan for everybody else's bad decisions. And she just kept talking over me, getting louder, saying I was acting cold, acting smug, acting like I wanted her friends to think less of her. That's when I realized she didn't actually hear me. She only heard the version of me she wanted. The one who said yes, the one who fixed it, the one who made her life easier by disappearing a little bit. It got worse when she said, "You've always been like this. You make everything about your feelings when I'm the one dealing with the problem." That one strung because it was exactly backward. I wasn't making it about my feelings. I was saying I wouldn't be part of a lie, but she had built the whole thing into a test, and I was apparently failing it because I wouldn't sacrifice myself on command. Then she said the thing I'll never forget. "You're supposed to have my back." And I said, "Not if it means lying for you." Dead quiet. Then she laughed, this short nasty sound, like I'd just proven something she'd already decided about me. She said, "Fine, then don't." So I didn't. I told her I was done with the conversation and hung up. My hands were shaking after that, not because I was scared of her exactly, but because I'd finally done the thing I'd avoided for years. I'd let somebody be upset with me and not chased after them to fix it. It felt awful. It also felt real. The next day she texted me a wall of anger, saying I'd made her feel abandoned. Then came the guilt stuff, how she'd trusted me, how I'd let people think she was a liar, how I'd made her look crazy. No, I made one choice, she made the lie. That was the part nobody seemed to want to touch. We argued in person a few days later, and by then I was so worn out that I didn't even raise my voice. I just told her I couldn't keep doing this thing where my role in the relationship was to absorb the consequences of her choices and call it love. She said I was being dramatic. She said every couple covers for each other sometimes. Maybe. But this wasn't missing a call or telling her boss she was sick when she was actually coming to my game. This was me being asked to help build a fake story and then being shamed when I said no. That's not support. That's a hostage situation with nicer words. She ended up saying if I wouldn't stand beside her, then I didn't really care about her. And honestly, maybe that was the part that broke it open for me. Because I did care. I cared enough not to lie. I cared enough not to keep pretending trust meant I had to erase my own boundaries. I cared enough to stop being useful for 5 minutes and be honest instead. She broke up with me that night, said I'd changed, said I was colder than before. Maybe I had changed. Or maybe I'd just stopped performing the version of myself that made everybody comfortable. Either way, it was over. And after the crying stopped, after the texts stopped, after the whole thing went quiet, I sat there and realized something simple and kind of brutal. A relationship that only works when I silence myself isn't really a relationship. It's just me doing unpaid damage control.
I did something small, and it spiraled into the biggest decision of my life. I slapped the note on the kitchen counter and walked away like it was nothing, which honestly was the whole point. It was one sentence, maybe two if you counted the part where I told them to stop acting like I was furniture. Nothing crazy, nothing I hadn't said out loud 100 times before. But this time I was done saying it with my face and my voice, while everyone stared through me like I was some annoying noise they could ignore until it stopped. So I wrote it down, Sharpie on a ripped piece of notebook paper. Real classy. I can still remember how hard my hand was shaking when I left it there, right next to the stupid fruit bowl nobody ever touched. And yeah, I know that sounds dramatic as hell for a note, but after getting brushed off for years, it felt like the first thing I'd done that was actually mine. The note was nasty, not like murder note nasty, just mean enough to make a point. I said if they were so committed to ignoring me, they could keep doing it without expecting me to keep showing up like a loyal little dog. I called out every time I'd said I wasn't okay and got hit with a "we're busy" or "you're overreacting" or my personal favorite, "don't start," which is rich, coming from people who treated every real feeling I had like an inconvenience. I didn't even plan to leave it where they'd see it right away. I thought I'd go out, cool off, come back later, and maybe feel a little less like I was about to explode, but they found it before I even made it to the gate. Of course they did. No one in that house ever missed a chance to read me when I didn't want them to. My mom called my name first, that tight voice she uses when she wants to sound calm but is already angry. Then my dad started in with the whole "what is wrong with you" thing, like the problem had appeared out of nowhere in the shape of a piece of paper. My brother came in last, which was pretty on brand. He always showed up once the rest of them had picked a side, like he was waiting for the official family position before deciding what kind of smart-ass comment to make. He read the note out loud once, then twice, like repeating it would make it more ridiculous. He got to the part where I said I didn't feel heard and snorted. Snorted. That was apparently the moment everyone decided the real issue was that I'd been rude. So now it was a family meeting. Great, my favorite sport. They circled around me in the kitchen while I stood there with my arms crossed, trying to act like I didn't care. I did care. That was the sick joke of it. I cared so much my chest hurt. But caring in that house was like handing someone a weapon and asking them to aim. They always knew how to use it against me. My mom said I was being disrespectful. My dad said I was making everything about myself. My brother said I always needed attention when things weren't going my way. I laughed at that one, actually laughed. Because if they'd ever once paid attention to me without me having to set something on fire first, maybe I wouldn't have learned how to scream through a piece of paper. Then my mom said something that made the whole room go quiet. She said, "You can't keep punishing us because you're unhappy." Punishing us. I swear to God, I almost threw the chair. Not because it was clever, because it was exactly the kind of sentence that told me they built an entire story where I was the villain for having a reaction to years of being dismissed. I told her I wasn't punishing anyone, I was reacting. There's a difference. She told me I was always so negative. My dad said I was impossible lately. My brother muttered that maybe if I stopped acting so pathetic, people would want to be around me more. That one landed hard. And then I snapped, full volume, no filter. I told them they didn't get to act shocked that I was angry when every time I said I was hurting. They treated me like I was dramatic, lazy, dramatic again, or just looking for a fight. I told them I was tired of being the house joke, tired of hearing how I was the one who made everything tense, tired of watching them protect each other from the truth while I was expected to smile and take it. My dad started talking over me, which somehow made me even madder, and my brother told me to calm down, which was hilarious coming from him because I'd seen that dude break a remote over a game loss and punch a wall because someone beat him to the shower. That's when my mom said, quiet as anything, "Maybe this is why you've got no one else." That sentence, Jesus, that one didn't just hit, it cracked something open. Because she wasn't wrong in the way she thought she was. I didn't have anyone else, not really. I had the same dead-end routine, the same house, the same people, the same old scripts. My friends were the kind of guys who thought being messed up was funny until it got too real, and then they vanished. The version of me that stayed and took it day after day had disappeared somewhere along the line. I wasn't even mad anymore. I was just tired, dead tired, like I'd been carrying a backpack full of bricks and only then noticed my back was broken. I went to my room and locked the door, and for once nobody banged on it. They just argued louder in the hall, each of them trying to win a version of the story where they were the reasonable one. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. There was this moment, stupidly small, where I realized I'd been waiting for one of them to finally say, "We're sorry." We didn't see it, but they weren't going to say that, not then, maybe not ever. And that was the part that made the choice for me, not the note, not the yelling. The silence after, when I understood that if I stayed, I'd keep shrinking to fit inside a family that only knew how to love me when I was easy. So I opened my contacts and called Nathan. Yeah, him, my older brother, the one who'd moved out years ago and somehow become the family example nobody could shut up about. Mr. Responsible, Mr. Has his life together. I used to hate him for it, still kind of do, if I'm honest. But he answered on the second ring and I didn't even try to sound cool. I just said, "I need to get out." He didn't ask a bunch of stupid questions, didn't say I was being dramatic. He just went quiet for a second and said, "Pack a bag, I'm outside in 20. That was it. 20 minutes, no lecture, no speech, no performance, just action. I stuffed a duffel with whatever I could grab without thinking too hard, because if I thought too hard I'd stay. I could hear them still arguing downstairs, like the house itself was chewing on me while I tried to leave it. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my charger twice. Ridiculous. I grabbed it anyway. Then I stood at my bedroom door for a second, listening, and I felt this weird, awful mix of guilt and relief. Guilt because leaving felt like betrayal. Relief because I knew deep down that if I didn't go now, I'd never go. That scared me more than the yelling did. When I walked out, my dad was in the hallway. He looked surprised, like he'd assumed this would all blow over if he kept being loud enough. I told him I was done, not in some movie way, just plain, done. He said I was making a huge mistake. Maybe I was. Maybe that was the first smart thing I'd done in years. My mom came to the stairs but didn't come all the way down, which honestly said everything. My brother didn't even look at me. Fine, whatever. I walked past all of them with my bag on my shoulder and got into Nathan's car without looking back, because if I looked back, I knew I'd fold. And here's the part I didn't expect. Once I was gone, once the house got smaller in the mirror, I didn't feel rebellious. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad, like really painfully sad, because the note wasn't the beginning of the mess. It was proof that I'd been trying to speak for a long time and no one had bothered listening until I made it ugly enough to notice. That tiny note didn't destroy my family. It exposed it. Every argument after that was just the truth getting dragged into the open, kicking and screaming. I'm staying with Nathan now. We don't talk about feelings for fun, which is honestly perfect. He just leaves food in the fridge and asks if I need a lift somewhere. No one's calling me lazy here. No one's rolling their eyes when I say I'm not good. It's not magic. I'm still angry. I'm still embarrassed about how it all went down, but I'm also not trapped in that cycle anymore, waiting for the same people to become different just because I wanted them to. That was the hardest part, admitting I couldn't fix a house that only stood up when I kept breaking myself against it. And yeah, the whole thing started with one nasty note. Stupid, right? Except it wasn't really about the note at all. It was about the fact that I finally did something small enough for them to see, and it forced me to see something bigger. I wasn't the problem they kept making me out to be. I was the warning sign they kept ignoring.
I did something small, and it spiraled into the biggest decision of my life. I turned my phone face down on the counter and just stood there for a second, staring at the stupid little crack near the corner of the screen like it had answers for me. The house was loud in that fake quiet way, you know. No yelling yet, no slammed doors, but you could feel it coming. My mom had already asked me twice to drive my sister to her friend's place, even though I had a quiz in the morning and a lab report due after that. And my dad had done that thing where he doesn't ask. He just starts talking like I already agreed. You're free, right? It's on your way. On my way to nowhere, apparently. I remember thinking really clearly that I was so tired of my life being one long yes, so I did something tiny. I silenced my phone. That was it, nothing dramatic, just one swipe. One little choice to buy myself 10 minutes of peace. And then my mom called again. I let it ring. That's when the whole thing started. She walked into the kitchen and looked at me like I'd slapped her. "Why aren't you answering?" she said, not even hiding the sharpness in her voice. I said I was busy. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Busy doing what? I almost said schoolwork, but I knew how that would go. Schoolwork was only real when it helped somebody else. If I was doing schoolwork for me, it was apparently optional. My sister came in behind her, already annoyed because she'd overheard enough to know she was about to become the victim. Dad showed up next, because of course he did, drawn to conflict like it was his favorite show. He looked at my phone on the counter, then at me and said, "It takes 2 seconds to answer." 2 seconds. That was what my life was worth. I should probably say I wasn't a difficult kid. I wasn't getting in trouble. I wasn't sneaking around. I wasn't blowing money or failing classes or any of that. I was the kid who reminded everyone about dentist appointments, the kid who stayed late after school to help carry boxes, the kid teachers used as an example when they wanted other people to behave. Marcus used to joke that I was basically a well-dressed emergency contact. I laughed when he said it, but it stung because it was true. People loved me when I was useful. When I needed something, they acted like I was adding inconvenience to their day. So yeah, silencing my phone felt like stealing a little piece of air. My mom said I was being disrespectful. My dad said I was acting like I thought I was too good for the family. My sister rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic, which was rich coming from the person who once cried because I didn't drive her to a party I had never agreed to in the first place. I tried to keep my voice even. I really did. I said I just needed a minute. That was the wrong thing to say. In our house, needing a minute was basically a confession of weakness. My mom said, "You don't get to shut everyone out because you're in a mood." That line, man, that one hit hard because it told me exactly how they saw me. Not tired, not overwhelmed, just moody, like my stress was a personality flaw. I could feel my face getting hot, and I hated that too because being upset always made me feel like I was doing something wrong. Dad started listing everything they'd done for me, like love was a bill they were collecting on. "We pay for your school, your clothes, your phone," he said. "We ask for one thing and suddenly it's a problem." My sister muttered something about me acting like a victim. That's when I finally said it. I said, "I'm not a victim. I'm exhausted." The room went quiet for half a second, and I swear that was louder than yelling. Then my mom crossed her arms and said, "From what? From what?" That question was so stupid it almost made me laugh, from being needed every second, from being treated like my time didn't exist, from hearing my own name only when somebody wanted something, from pretending I was fine while I was falling apart so slowly nobody noticed. I said I couldn't keep doing this. I said I was sick of being spoken to like I owed everyone access to me at all times. I said I was sick of being the person everyone counted on and nobody checked on. My voice shook, which pissed me off because I didn't want them seeing that part of me, but it was too late. Once it started, it all came out. How they'd missed every late night, every blank stare, every day I sat in my room after school because I didn't have the energy to talk to anyone. How they only seemed happy when I was the version of me that fit neatly into their plans. How I'd started to feel like if I ever stopped being helpful, there'd be nothing left for them to like. My mom looked stunned. My dad looked angry, which was somehow easier to handle than the stunned look. My sister looked uncomfortable, but not sorry. That part hurt too. I kept going anyway. I told them I wasn't going to be available for everything anymore. I told them I was taking my own car keys back, my own weekends back, my own damn life back. My dad said I was overreacting. I said maybe I was. Maybe I was overdue. That shut him up for a second. Then came the big part, the part I hadn't planned. I said I was moving out after school ended. Not maybe, not someday. I said it out loud, and once I did, it felt real in a way that scared me and lit me up at the same time. My mom said, "You can't be serious." I said I was dead serious. I said I loved them, but I couldn't stay in a house where my pain was treated like inconvenience. I said I'd spend the next few months getting ready, saving money, figuring out where I'd go, but I wasn't backing down. My dad said I was being selfish. Maybe, but it was the first selfish thing I'd ever done that felt like breathing. After that, nobody knew what to say. My sister left first, then my dad, then my mom just stood there with this look like she was trying to figure out when I stopped belonging to her version of me. I picked up my phone, turned it back on, and saw 11 missed calls. 11, all from the same 3 people. I laughed then, just once, because the whole thing was absurd. One silenced phone, one tiny refusal, that was the spark. That night I barely slept. I kept staring at the ceiling, waiting for the guilt to punch through. It did a little. I'm not pretending I felt nothing. I kept wondering if I'd just blown up my family over one stupid moment, but deep down I knew better. That moment didn't create the problem. It exposed it. I'd been shrinking for years to keep everyone else comfortable. I'd been so busy being easy to love that I forgot love wasn't supposed to feel like a job interview. The next morning I drove to school and sat in the parking lot longer than I should have. My hands were shaking, seriously shaking, but I felt something else under that, something stronger. Relief, not happiness, not yet, relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't just reacting to what everyone else wanted. I was choosing, and once I'd made that choice, I couldn't unmake it. It turns out the biggest decision of my life didn't come from some huge dramatic fight or some grand plan. It came from one tiny act of refusing to be available for one more second. One swipe, one silence, boom, everything changed.
I found out my coach was using me to cover his lies. I remember the exact second it stopped feeling normal. We were in the hallway after practice, and he was smiling at me in that warm, steady way that used to make me feel like I was finally somebody worth noticing. He had this habit of saying my name like it meant something, like I mattered. Seriously, I ate that up. I was the girl who usually got talked over, the girl people remembered only when they needed a spare jersey or a score sheet or somebody to blame. So when Coach started pulling me aside to help him with records and schedules, I thought I'd been chosen for once. I thought maybe he saw something in me that everyone else had missed. At first it was small stuff. He'd ask me to double-check attendance. He'd tell me to keep track of times because I was the only one he could trust to be careful. That line got me every time. He'd say it in front of other people too, and I swear I'd walk around afterward feeling like my chest was full of static. But then I started noticing weird things. Practice times changed after he'd already told us one thing, then he'd act like he never said it. A drill I wrote down would suddenly be wrong in his version. He'd tell one person one thing in private and something completely different in public, then somehow the mess always landed on me. Every time, always me. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it. That was my thing, honestly. I overthink everything. If someone looks annoyed, I assume I did something wrong. If someone laughs after I walk away, I assume it's me. So when Coach started correcting my records in front of people, I let it slide. When he said I must have copied the wrong time, I nodded. When he told the team I'd forgotten to pass along an update, I went hot all over and just stood there like an idiot while everyone looked at me. I hated how fast I believed him. I hated even more that part of me still wanted him to be good. But then I started checking everything. Messages, notes, screenshots. I saved the times he changed things and the times he told me different versions of the same story. I don't even know when it turned from confusion into dread. It was just this slow, sick feeling in my stomach, like I was finally seeing a picture that had been in front of me the whole time and I'd been too desperate to look at it. He was covering for himself, that was it. He'd make promises to parents, players, and staff that he never intended to keep, and when the truth came close, he'd shift the blame onto whoever was easiest. Me, because I was quiet. Because I wanted approval, because I didn't have anyone ready to jump in and defend me. The worst part was the little private moments. That's what still bothers me. He'd pull me aside and act concerned, like he was protecting me from drama, like he was doing me a favor by letting me in on things. He'd say stuff like, "I'm giving you responsibility because I see potential." And I'd feel my throat tighten because no adult had ever talked to me like that unless they wanted something. And I did want it. That's the embarrassing part. I wanted the praise so badly I didn't question why it always came with confusion attached. I didn't ask why I was being trusted with things no one else knew, then blamed when those exact things blew up. Then I found the messages, not even in some dramatic way, just there, plain enough that I couldn't pretend anymore. One message to one person said one thing, another message to someone else said the opposite, and my name was sitting right in the middle like I was some tool he could point at whenever the story needed a clean ending. I stared at my phone for so long my eyes hurt. I kept waiting for the part where it made sense. It didn't. It just got uglier. So I confronted him after practice. My voice was shaking so hard I could barely hear myself. I asked why he kept putting things on me that I didn't do. I asked why his messages didn't match. I asked why he kept telling people I'd messed up when the proof was right there. For 1 second, I thought he might actually apologize. Instead, he leaned back like I was being dramatic and told me I should be grateful he'd included me at all. Grateful. Can you believe that? He said it like he was doing me some massive favor by letting me stand near him. Like being used was the same thing as being valued. Like I should be honored to be useful. I went numb, completely. He kept talking, saying I was taking things the wrong way, saying I was too sensitive, saying he'd given me opportunities and I was turning them into a problem. That was when I finally saw it. He didn't care about me. He cared about what I could absorb for him. He'd built this version of me that was convenient, the quiet girl who'd hold things together, the lonely one who'd accept scraps and call it kindness. He'd counted on me not having enough confidence to fight back. He'd built his whole little lie on the fact that I was starving for approval. That's the part that still makes my stomach turn. I didn't yell, I wish I had, but I didn't. I just stood there while everything inside me cracked open. After that, I stopped answering his messages. I stopped showing up early to help. I stopped pretending I owed him anything. And yeah, it was messy. Of course it was. People still looked at me weird for a while, and some of them probably believed his version because that's easier than admitting the adult in the room was lying. But I can live with being misunderstood. I can't live in that fog again. What changed everything wasn't just finding out he lied. It was realizing how much of my life I'd been spending waiting for someone to choose me so I wouldn't have to choose myself. That sounds dramatic, I know, but it's true. I kept mistaking attention for care because I was so lonely I didn't know the difference. Now I do, or at least I'm learning. And every time I think about that coach, I remember how small he expected me to stay. Not anymore. Not for him.
I did something petty, and it spiraled into the biggest decision of my life. I sent one stupid text at 11:43 at night, and I knew exactly why I did it. Not because I was proud of it, not because it was clever, because I was tired, bone tired, the kind of tired that sits in your chest for months and makes even breathing feel like a task you're failing at. The text wasn't even that wild, just a little jab at Marcus, who had been getting on my nerves for weeks, and I knew it would irritate the right person because that's how our whole little group worked. One message could set off a chain reaction if you picked the right target, so I did it, sent it, put the phone face down and waited for the tiny rush of satisfaction I figured I'd get. Boom, there it was, for maybe 10 seconds. Then my stomach dropped because I knew I'd crossed a line I'd been tiptoeing around for a long time. Marcus replied almost immediately, and then Tyler chimed in, and then Sarah asked what my problem was, and suddenly I wasn't just being petty. I was the villain in a group chat full of people who were very committed to being disappointed in me. I stared at the screen and thought, great, this is exactly what I didn't need. But here's the thing, I didn't apologize right away like I normally would have. I didn't scramble to smooth it over and make everybody comfortable. I just sat there in my room with the light off, jaw clenched so hard it hurt, and I realized I wasn't scared of the fallout as much as I was relieved that I had finally done one honest thing, even if it was ugly. The next morning my phone was dead quiet, except for one message from Mom asking if I was still coming home for dinner, and another from Dad telling me not to be late because they had a lot to discuss. That phrase right there. A lot to discuss, I swear, hearing that made my skin go cold. Because in my house, a lot to discuss never meant a conversation. It meant a correction. It meant a list of all the ways I had disappointed people by not being easier, calmer, better, more grateful, more available. I went to school, sat through Mrs. Bennett's class staring at the board like I could disappear into it, and by lunch I already felt like I was underwater. Marcus kept shooting me looks from across the table, Tyler avoided my eyes, and Sarah acted like I had personally ruined her week. Maybe I had, I didn't even know anymore. Then Coach Reynolds pulled me aside after practice and asked if everything was fine at home, which was his polite way of saying I looked like hell. I nearly laughed. Fine. That word had become a joke. I'd been saying it so long I think I forgot what it was supposed to mean. I told him I was just stressed, and he nodded like he believed me, but I could see he didn't. That night at dinner, Dad barely let me finish my first bite before he started talking about responsibility, respect, and how people only tolerate bad behavior for so long when they've invested in you. Invested in me, like I was a machine they'd bought and were now annoyed to find out had a defect. Mom kept glancing between us, lips tight, and I just sat there with my fork in my hand, feeling this weird split happen inside me. Part of me wanted to apologize and go back to being manageable. The other part was done. Done with the constant measuring. Done with being praised for not causing trouble. Done with being the guy who always said yes because saying no made everyone look at me like I'd changed into a stranger. So I said, "I'm tired." That was it. 2 words. Dad looked offended, like tired was something you earned only after pleasing him enough, and Mom asked if I'd taken on too much at school. No, that wasn't it. It was everything. It was years of being the one who remembered birthdays, cleaned up messes, stayed late, helped out, kept my grades up, kept my mouth shut, and swallowed every ugly feeling until it turned into something heavy and mean inside me. I told them I wasn't okay. Not dramatic. Not as a threat, just true. My voice shook like crazy, but I kept going anyway. I said I'd been feeling low for a long time. I said I couldn't focus. I said sometimes I woke up already exhausted, like the day had won before it started. Nobody spoke for a second. Then Dad asked if this had anything to do with the text, and that almost made me laugh again, because of course he would think the problem was the one visible thing instead of the years of invisible stuff underneath it. But then something shifted. Not in him, in me. I heard myself say, "I think I need help." And there it was, the biggest sentence of my life, hiding behind a petty message and a bad dinner. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put my fork down. Mom started crying first, which somehow made me cry too, and Dad went quiet in that way people do when they're trying to keep control of a room they've already lost. The next few days were a blur of awkward silences, schoolwork I barely touched, and one brutal meeting with the school counselor, where I finally admitted that I hadn't just been stressed. I had been depressed. I hated saying it out loud because it made it real, and real meant it couldn't be fixed by trying harder. That was the part I'd fought for so long. I had built my whole identity around being the guy who could handle it, the guy who didn't need anything, the guy who could take a hit and keep smiling. Turns out that wasn't strength, it was camouflage. After that, I stopped pretending the petty text was the real story. It was just the spark. The actual fire was everything I'd buried to keep everybody else comfortable. Marcus eventually stopped being mad, Sarah stopped acting like I'd personally betrayed her, and Tyler came by one afternoon and admitted he'd seen me getting worse for months but didn't know how to say it. That one hurt, honestly, because I'd been so busy performing normal that even the people closest to me thought I was just busy, just tired, just me, but I wasn't just anything. I was sick and scared and exhausted and too proud to ask for help until I'd already hit the wall. So yeah, I did something petty. I sent a text I shouldn't have sent. It caused drama, it embarrassed me, it pissed people off. Fine, I can live with that. What I can't live with anymore is pretending I have to disappear just to be easy to love. That night changed everything because it finally made me choose. Not them, me, and honestly, I should have done it a lot sooner. My manager tried to ruin my life, so I destroyed his legally. I still remember the first time she did it, that little smile she gave me after dumping 3 urgent things on my desk at 4:45 on a Friday. "You're so good under pressure, Ethan," she said like it was a compliment and not a warning. I was tired in that bone-deep way that makes your hands feel heavy, but I just nodded because that's what I always did. I was the guy who stayed late, answered emails fast, and never made a scene. Apparently that made me easy to use. Seriously, for months she kept stacking my work higher and higher, then acting shocked when I looked worn out. If I said I was slammed, she'd tilt her head and say I seemed off lately. If I asked for priorities, she'd act like I was being difficult. Quietly, she started building this fake story that I was slipping, that I wasn't reliable anymore, that I needed to be watched. And the worst part was how normal she made it sound, like I was the problem for noticing. At first, I thought I just had to work harder and keep my head down. That was my reflex. That was always my reflex. I told myself she was stressed, the department was busy, maybe I was overreacting. But then things started getting weird in a way that made my stomach twist. She'd send me a task in email, then later deny she ever asked for it. She'd change deadlines in passing, then blame me when I followed the written one. Once she actually CC'd 2 people on a message saying I had missed a client call, even though I'd never been told about the call in the first place. I remember sitting there staring at the screen, feeling this hot, sick pressure behind my eyes, not because I wanted to cry, because I realized she wasn't careless. She was setting traps, small ones, clean enough to deny, messy enough to hurt me. So I started saving everything. Every email, every chat, every calendar invite, every half-remembered comment she made in the hall. I built a timeline in a private folder at home, one ugly entry at a time. Nothing dramatic, just dates, times, names, and what was actually said. I started writing things down right after meetings while they were still fresh, because I knew if I didn't, she'd count on confusion. That was her whole thing, really. Keep people exhausted, keep them uncertain, keep them too drained to push back. It worked on a lot of people. It almost worked on me. But once I saw the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. She wasn't just overloading me. She was creating a record that made me look incompetent while protecting herself from every angle. The first real break came when she accused me of missing an internal deadline that had never been sent to me. She did it in front of another manager, too, in that calm voice people use when they're trying to sound reasonable while stabbing you in public. I didn't argue, I just said I'd check my records. That night, I pulled up the email chain, the chat log, and the calendar history. The deadline she was talking about had been discussed in a meeting she'd scheduled, but she'd never assigned it to me. In fact, I had a message from her, sent the day after, asking me to focus on something else first. It was all right there, black and white, beautiful. I sent the whole chain to HR with a short note asking for clarification on task ownership and communication standards. Very polite, very boring. She had no idea I'd just handed her the rope she'd been weaving for months. After that, she got meaner, more careful, but meaner. She started checking in on me 5 times a day, asking if I was coping, asking if I needed support, asking in that fake concerned voice that made my skin crawl. Then she'd pile on another assignment and act like she was helping me grow. I could feel her trying to force a paper trail of her own, something that would make me seem unstable or overwhelmed, but I stayed calm. That was the hardest part, honestly. Not because I was scared of her, but because I wanted so badly to snap. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her smug little act and her fake sympathy and the way she'd spent months trying to make my life smaller. Instead, I kept writing things down. I asked for instructions in email. I summarized meetings right after they ended. I made her confirm everything, every single time. Then she made her biggest mistake. She called me into a one-on-one and told me flat out that my performance had become a concern and that if I couldn't handle the workload, maybe this wasn't the right fit. No shouting, no drama, just a neat little threat wrapped in professional language. I looked at her and said I understood. Then I asked her to clarify which tasks she believed I'd failed to complete when they were assigned and which deadlines had been communicated to me. She blinked twice. I watched the confidence drain out of her face for just a second before she covered it with that tight smile. She said she'd follow up later. She never did. Instead, I walked out, went back to my desk, and emailed HR asking for a formal review of my workload and the repeated inconsistencies in management communication. I attached everything: the emails, the timestamps, the notes, the whole ugly stack. That was when the floor started moving under her. HR called me in first, and for the first time I saw people actually reading what I'd saved. Not skimming, reading. They asked questions. Real ones. When had this started? Did she often change instructions verbally? Had I ever been told not to document things? Had I noticed anyone else getting the same treatment? I answered all of it, calmly, honestly. It felt strange, like finally speaking in a room where the air wasn't poisoned. They asked if I'd be willing to provide a full timeline, so I handed over the document I'd been building for months. Pages of it. Dates, screenshots, meeting notes, escalation emails, the whole chain. You could almost see the shape of the case forming while they sat there with their faces getting tighter and tighter. Then came the part she never expected. Other people spoke up, not right away, but enough. One coworker admitted she'd been told one thing by the manager and something different by me, then later realized I'd been set up to take the blame. Another said she'd been afraid to say anything because the manager had a habit of making people look unreliable if they pushed back. That was the real crack, not just my evidence but the pattern. Once the first person named it, the rest started fitting together fast. Suddenly it was Ethan being emotional or overwhelmed. It was a manager running a dirty little game and assuming nobody would challenge her because she looked polished and sounded professional. She got called into a meeting with HR and upper management a few days later. I wasn't in the room, but I didn't need to be. The silence after that said enough. She tried to spin it, of course. Tried to say I misunderstood, tried to claim I was struggling with stress, tried to make it sound like all she'd done was support me. But the emails didn't lie. The timeline didn't lie. The messages where she contradicted herself didn't lie. And once the company realized that one bad manager could cost them way more than one quiet employee ever would, everything changed fast. She was suspended, then removed from the team. And the whole thing ended with an apology I didn't need and a settlement offer they hoped would make the problem disappear. I took it. I wasn't stupid, but I also made sure the record stayed intact. Every document, every complaint, every response. She didn't ruin me. She almost did, sure. Close enough to make me understand how ugly people can get when they think silence means weakness. But silence can also be a weapon. It can mean you're watching. It can mean you're building a case while someone else keeps digging their own grave with fancy words and fake concern. She thought I was tired, soft, and easy to push around. What I was really was patient. And that turned out to be a far worse problem for her than anger ever would have been. My roommate next door wasn't who they said they were. I moved into that apartment because I needed somewhere cheap, quiet, and far enough away from everybody that no one would keep asking me why I looked tired all the time. That was the whole plan. Keep my head down, go to class, go to work, come home, sleep, repeat. Simple, boring, safe. At least that's what I thought. The place was split into 2 units, and my roommate lived in the one next door. separated by a thin wall and a shared laundry room that smelled like old detergent and damp concrete. Her name was supposed to be Maya. That was what the landlord said, and that was what the sticky note on the mailbox said, and that was what she told me when I first ran into her outside with a box of frozen pizza and a smile that looked a little too practiced. She was friendly in that effortless way that makes you relax before you even know you did. She laughed at the right times, remembered my name immediately, and said things like, "We should keep this place peaceful, right?" And I remember thinking, thank God, finally someone normal. Seriously, I was so relieved I didn't even notice how carefully she watched me while she said it. The first weird thing was tiny. Too tiny to matter, really. She had no key to the laundry room, even though the landlord had said both units were supposed to get one. She said hers had been lost before she moved in. Fine. Then I noticed she never seemed to carry mail, even though her mailbox was always stuffed with envelopes she claimed were junk. Then there were the phone calls. She'd answer them in the hall with her back turned to me, voice low and flat, and the second she saw me, she'd switch back into that bright, easy laugh like nothing had happened. I told myself I was being nosy. That's what I always did. I told myself I was reading too much into small stuff because I was lonely and worn out and had too much time alone with my own thoughts. But the feeling didn't go away. It got under my skin. One night I came home late from work and found her sitting in the hallway outside her door, just sitting there in the dark with her knees pulled up, like she was waiting for someone. She smiled when she saw me, and for a second her face looked different, almost blank. Then it snapped back into place. "Long day?" she asked. I said yeah. She said she had been locked out. I asked if she wanted me to call the landlord. She said no way, too late, he'd just get annoyed. That should have been enough. It wasn't. The next morning she was already in the kitchen when I got up, making coffee like she owned the place. She was wearing one of my hoodies, my actual hoodie, the grey one with the torn cuff I'd left hanging over my chair. I stared at it too long, and she looked down like she had only just noticed. "Oh," she said, tugging at the sleeve, smiling without smiling. I thought it was mine. My stomach just dropped. I wanted to call her out, but the words caught in my throat because she was standing there so calm, like I was the weird one for staring. So I let it go, again. That became a pattern. Small things, a missing charger, a package moved from my doorstep to hers, a note on my counter written in handwriting I didn't recognize that said, "Don't worry, I moved your stuff so it wouldn't get stolen." I didn't know whether to feel grateful or sick. Then Marcus, my coworker, stopped by one evening because I had left my wallet at work. He saw Maya in the hallway and froze, just for a second, long enough for me to notice. She said hi like they were old friends. Marcus said hi back like he was trying not to choke on the word. Later, when she was in her unit and the door was shut, I asked him if he knew her. He laughed way too fast and said no, maybe he just recognized her face from somewhere, but he wouldn't look at me. That was the moment I stopped pretending I was imagining it. I started paying attention. I listened when she made calls. I watched when she left. I checked the hallway cameras in the lobby by asking the front desk clerk, who liked me because I always held doors open and never complained. There were gaps in the footage, not all the time, just enough to make it look like a glitch if you weren't looking hard. But I was looking hard now. I found out her lease paperwork didn't match the apartment number. I found out the landlord had only met her once, and even he seemed confused when I brought up her name. "Maya," he said, "there's no Maya here." He said it like I had made a mistake, like I was embarrassing both of us. I went back to the front desk and pulled out my phone, showed him a picture I'd taken of her by accident in the hallway. He stared at it too long, then said he didn't want trouble and suggested maybe she'd sublet from someone else. But the unit next door was supposed to be empty before she moved in. I knew that. He knew that too. Everyone knew something and nobody wanted to say it out loud. That was the worst part, not the lies, the silence around them. I kept checking details because I couldn't shake the feeling that if I just lined everything up, it would make sense. The answer came from a tiny thing, of course. A piece of mail I accidentally opened because it had my apartment number on it but her name inside. It was from a county records office 2 towns over. Not a bill, not a notice. A change of address confirmation and a sealed alert about an identity complaint. There was another name on the form, one she'd been using before Maya. I won't write it here because even now it feels wrong, but it wasn't hers. She had been moving from place to place under different names for years, leaving complaints, empty units, confused landlords, and people too polite to press. Too polite, that word kept hitting me. I sat on the kitchen floor with that paper in my hands and felt stupid, honestly. Not because I hadn't known. Because deep down I think I'd known enough. I just didn't trust myself. I was so used to keeping the peace that even when my gut was screaming, I kept telling it to wait. Then she came home. I heard her keys, heard the front door open, heard her hum like nothing in the world was wrong. I folded the paper, stood up, and when she walked in I asked her who she really was. She didn't even flinch. That scared me more than if she'd screamed. She looked at me for a long second, then sighed like I was the inconvenience in the room. You finally noticed, she said. That's all, no apology, no denial. She just admitted it, almost bored. And right after that, everything got messier. She started saying things that made my skin go cold, that she knew I wouldn't tell anyone, that people like me always wait too long. That I liked being the nice guy because it let me avoid conflict, and conflict had kept me from asking the right questions. She wasn't wrong, and I hated her for that. I called the police anyway. They came, they took statements, they acted like maybe it was a landlord issue, a paperwork issue, a misunderstanding. One officer actually asked if I had proof she meant me harm. Proof. Like the lying, the stealing, the fake name, the forged records, the whole mess didn't count unless she had already broken my face. They eventually found out she'd been using the apartment as a stopover while running scams under different identities. Nothing dramatic enough for the news, just enough to ruin people's lives in quiet ways. My landlord acted shocked. The front desk clerk said she had seemed so polite. Of course she had, that's how she worked. That's how people like that survive. And the whole time I kept thinking about how easy it would have been for someone to stop this sooner if they hadn't assumed being pleasant meant being harmless. I moved out a week later. I couldn't stay there. Every wall felt like it was holding its breath. I kept replaying all the moments I brushed it off, all the little alarms I explained away because I didn't want to look paranoid or rude. Maybe I was lonely. Maybe I was blind, maybe both, but I know this much now. Sometimes the warning signs are obvious, and the real danger is how many people will smile, shrug, and let them pass because it's easier than making a scene. I stayed quiet for years, then finally told the truth about my teacher's secret. Mrs. Bennett was the kind of teacher everybody trusted without thinking about it. She had that calm voice, that patient smile, that habit of looking right at you like you were the only kid in the room who mattered. I was one of her favorites, or at least that's what everyone said, and for a while I wore that like a badge. It felt good, real good. When you're the kid who always does the right thing, getting singled out by a teacher feels like proof that you're doing something right with your life. So I tried harder. I always tried harder. I stayed after class, answered every question, helped pass out papers, cleaned the board when nobody else moved. I wanted to be the one she could count on. The one who never made trouble, the one who got it. Seriously, I was so used to being useful that I didn't even notice when it started to turn ugly. At first it was small stuff, extra time alone after class, private conversations that went on too long, weird little comments about how mature I was compared to the other boys. I remember laughing some of it off because that's what you do when an adult says something odd and you're not sure if you're allowed to feel weird about it. You tell yourself you're overthinking. You tell yourself she's just nice. You tell yourself being chosen is a good thing, and for a while I did, I really did. Then the secret started. Not some dramatic movie thing, nothing like that. Just this quiet, heavy thing sitting between us that I didn't know how to name and didn't know how to get rid of. She asked me to keep things private, said she trusted me, said other people wouldn't understand, said it would look bad if anyone got the wrong idea. That part stuck with me, the wrong idea. I remember thinking, what does that even mean? But I didn't ask, I just nodded. That's what I did. Nod, smile, comply. It was easier than making a scene, easier than being the kid who misread a teacher and ruined everything. And once you agree to one secret, the next one comes faster. It always does. I started carrying that weight to school, home, practice, everywhere. Mom would ask how my day was and I'd say fine. Dad would ask about grades and I'd say good. Marcus would joke around in the hallway and I'd laugh like normal. Meanwhile, my chest felt tight all the time, like I was trying to breathe through a wet towel. Then depression hit me hard. Or maybe it had been building for years and finally got loud enough that I couldn't ignore it. I stopped sleeping right. Food tasted like cardboard. Some mornings I stared at the bathroom mirror and honestly couldn't tell if I was tired or just gone. But nobody around me saw it for what it was. Teachers called me focused. My parents called me stressed. Mrs. Bennett called me sensitive in that soft, pitying voice that made me want to disappear. That was the part that messed with me the most. She knew I was slipping. She had to know. I was right there in front of her, shrinking by the week, and she still acted like everything was under control because I kept smiling. I kept showing up. I kept doing what I was told. So maybe she thought I was fine, or maybe it was easier for her if she did. Look, I spent a long time blaming myself for all of it, for not speaking up sooner, for not saying no. For not being stronger, louder, smarter, whatever people expect a kid to be when an adult crosses a line and leaves them carrying the proof. I hated that part, hated myself for it. Hated waking up and thinking maybe I deserved to feel sick because I had been stupid enough to trust her. That thought can chew through you. It really can. And the worst part was how normal life kept moving. Tests still happened. Soccer practice still happened. Dinner still happened. Everybody acted like the world was solid while I was walking around with this secret in my ribs like broken glass. Then one day it hit me that staying quiet wasn't protecting anyone. It wasn't protecting me, and it sure as hell wasn't protecting the truth. I was sitting in class, listening to Mrs. Bennett talk about honesty like it was some easy, clean thing, and I almost laughed out loud. My hands were shaking under my desk. I remember staring at the paper in front of me and thinking, I'm done. Just done, not dramatic, just empty. So after school, I went straight to the principal's office. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I kept waiting to turn around. I didn't. I sat down, and when they asked what was wrong, I told them everything. Every private meeting, every weird comment, every time she made me feel like I owed her silence. Every day I had to act normal while I was falling apart. Once I started, I couldn't stop. It all came out fast and messy and ugly. My voice cracked. I cried. I hated crying in front of them, but I couldn't help it. They kept asking questions, and I answered them. No decorations, no softening, just the truth. That's all I had left. The fallout was immediate. People looked shocked, then careful, then angry in that quiet, stunned way adults get when they've been forced to see something they missed on purpose or by accident. Mrs. Bennett was removed. Meetings happened. Phones rang. My parents found out, and my mom started crying before I even made it home. Dad went completely still, which scared me more than yelling would have. There were apologies. Lots of them. Some sounded real. Some sounded like people trying to get through a disaster without admitting how close it came to happening right in front of them. I don't remember every detail, and honestly, I don't care to. What I remember is walking outside that evening and feeling the air hit my face like I hadn't been outside in months. Not happy, not fixed, just lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't holding the secret for her. I wasn't protecting the version of me that made everyone comfortable. I wasn't pretending I had been fine, and that more than anything felt like breathing again. I found out my girlfriend was using my depression as a joke. It started with a stupid little thing, honestly. My phone was on the table while I was in the bathroom, and when I came back, a group chat preview was still lit up on the screen. I wasn't trying to snoop, I really wasn't. I just saw my name, then my girlfriend Ava's name, then a line that made my stomach drop so hard I felt it in my knees. I opened it. Bad idea, I guess. Or maybe the best one I ever made, because there it was. Ava joking with her friends about how I did the sad guy thing again, how I looked like a lost puppy when I got quiet, how I was basically a charity case with good manners. Seriously, charity case. My chest went cold. I read it twice, then 3 times, because part of me kept thinking I had to be missing the tone, the context, something. But no, it was right there in plain text, like a knife laid on a table, and nobody bothered to hide it. I just stood there holding the phone while my heart thudded like it was trying to get out on its own. At first, I did the thing I always do. I tried to make excuses for other people. Maybe she was angry. Maybe it was some dumb joke that landed badly. Maybe her friends were worse and she was just trying to fit in. That was me every time. The guy who keeps giving people extra chances because I hate the idea that I misread them. The guy who smiles and says it's fine when it's not. The guy who keeps showing up. For her, for everyone. That night I couldn't sleep, and I kept replaying every weird little moment from the last few months. The half-second pause when I told her I was having a rough day. The way she once laughed and said, "You do love your little mood swings," like I was some kind of annoying mascot. The time she asked if I was feeling dramatic again, when I cancelled plans because I couldn't get out of bed. I had laughed then. God, I hate that part. I laughed because I thought she was teasing me in a normal way, and because I didn't want to be the guy who made everything heavy. Now it all looked different. Sharper. Meaner. I didn't confront her right away. I waited. I know how that sounds, but I needed to be sure, and I needed to know if the rest of the room had been laughing with her the whole time. So I looked at more messages, not even proud of it, just desperate. Ava had said stuff to 2 of her friends, Maya and Jenna, about how I was fine as long as you don't ask him real questions, and how I was sweet, but kind of pathetic when he's in one of his little holes. Little holes, that's what she called my depression. Like it was an inconvenience in the floor. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I also saw replies, not from everyone but enough, a laughing emoji, a "he really is like that," a "girl, that's rough," nobody telling her to stop. Nobody saying that was messed up. That part hit almost as hard as the joke itself. It wasn't just Ava, it was the silence around her, the easy silence, the kind that tells you people noticed you were hurting and decided it wasn't their problem. The next day I went to work like normal. I made coffee, I answered emails, I smiled at the right times. That was the weirdest part. My body was moving on habit while my brain kept replaying one sentence over and over, charity case with good manners. I almost laughed at the irony because that's exactly how I had been trained to be. Useful, polite, easy to keep around. My dad used to say I was low maintenance like it was a compliment. Everyone loves that version of you until they find out what it costs to stay that way. At lunch, Marcus texted me and asked if I was okay because I sounded off the night before. I almost told him everything. Almost, but I didn't. I just said I was tired. Again, always tired. That's the safest lie. People know what to do with tired. They don't know what to do with hurt. When I finally confronted Ava, I did it in her car in a parking lot because I didn't trust myself to do it in public. I remember the smell of old fries and her vanilla air freshener. I remember my own voice being way calmer than I felt. I asked her why she was talking about me like that. She looked at me blankly at first, then did this tiny, gross smile like she thought she could still turn it into a misunderstanding. She said, "Oh my God, you read that. Like the problem was privacy, not cruelty." Then she tried to laugh it off, said it was just venting, said her friends all joke like that. Said I was taking it too seriously because I was in one of my moods. That word again. Moods. Like being depressed was some quirky weather pattern and not a real thing eating at me from the inside. I asked her if she thought I was pathetic. She looked away. That was answer enough, but then she went further. She said I made it easy because I never got mad. She said she assumed I knew people joked about me because I was so quiet about everything else. Quiet, nice, easy, there it was. The exact personality she'd been feeding on. I felt something in me just shut off. Not explode, shut off. Like a light going dead in a room nobody bothered to enter. I ended it right there. No speech, no begging, no dramatic scene, just get out of the car. She stared at me like I was speaking another language. Then she got angry, which was almost funny in a sick way because suddenly my reaction was the problem. She said I was overreacting, that I always make her the villain when I'm feeling insecure. I almost said something cruel back. Almost. But I didn't want to become the version of myself she could point to and say, "See, that's why we joked." So I got out instead. I walked home in the dark with my hands stuffed in my pockets and my face burning, and I kept thinking about how many times I had made myself smaller so other people could stay comfortable. How many times I had swallowed a sentence because I didn't want to ruin the mood. How many times I had been the easy one while everyone else got to be honest. The weirdest part is that once the shock wore off, the sadness didn't come first. The sadness came later. First came anger. Clean, bright anger. It didn't fix anything, but it gave me shape again. I started answering people differently. I stopped pretending I was fine when I wasn't. I told Marcus what happened and he didn't laugh. He just looked sick and asked why I hadn't told him sooner. I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. Mrs. Bennett from back in school used to say I was so mature for my age, and I used to wear that like armor. Now it just sounds sad. A kid learning early that being easy to handle is the fastest way to get left alone with your own pain. Ava texted me for days after, first angry, then apologetic, then angry again when I didn't bite. Her friends went quiet. That's how it goes, right? People act like the joke was harmless until they realize the punchline isn't available anymore. I kept thinking about how many times I had been in rooms where I wasn't respected, just tolerated, and I had mistaken that for closeness because I was desperate to be seen as enough. Not useful, not entertaining, just enough. That's what changed. Not just that she mocked my depression, but that she made me realize I had been handing my softest parts to people who only knew how to use them against me. That hurt. A lot. But it also cleared something out inside me. I still get quiet sometimes. I still have bad days. I still don't know how to explain all of it cleanly. But now, when someone laughs a little too late, or calls me easy or tries to turn my pain into a story for other people, I hear it. I really hear it. And I don't stay silent just to keep the room comfortable anymore.